Congressman Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me today. I do want to start though, what would be your biggest priority if you were elected governor?
I think there's two things. It's affordability and accountability. And for me, it starts with property taxes went up the most in 30 years last December. We got to get control of property taxes because it's taxing seniors out of their homes, and it's really making it difficult for young people to be able to buy a new home. The second part is accountability. We need to make sure that all agencies, all parts of state government are audited. We've seen the fraud that's going on around the country. Some of that is surely going on in Wisconsin, and we just want to make sure that the taxpayers are not paying for those fraudsters that are stealing from people of Wisconsin.
And do you think that affordability is the biggest issue that's facing Wisconsinites today?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of affordability and the economy. People are seeing that it's not easy to make ends meet. And I especially listen to young people, and they talk about how it's really, you talk about the American dream, their parents and their grandparents. Well, how are we going to achieve that if we can't buy a home, if we can't get started with our families? And so I think that affordability part of it is a big deal. And that's why the property taxes are really important. Also, we've had the largest increase in utility rates the last 8 years that we've seen in a long time. We used to be second lowest. We're now the second highest, over $2 billion in increases. So people are really being nickeled and dimed, and state government can help by reducing that burden on people.
And how do you plan on reducing that burden?
So we'll end the 400-year property tax. I'll propose that on day one. The accountability part of it, we will audit all of state government. We're going to do that on day one. And then we're going to work over time to make sure that those utility bills are not going up and have more affordable energy here in Wisconsin. So there's a series of things that we can do to make things more affordable. I mean, I'd give you one quick example is there was a proposal to return the surplus to the people of Wisconsin, and it was rejected. I would make sure that we return all of the surplus to the people of Wisconsin.
And you were against that bill that was brought up as well?
Yeah, I opposed the bill because it didn't return all of the surplus. So we should return all of the surplus to the people of Wisconsin. That was my point, is that let's send every penny back. They did not want to return all of it to people of Wisconsin.
How can you responsibly do that and make sure that the state still has some money in the bank or is ready for a rainy day?
Yeah, so I served on the Joint Finance Committee when I was in the legislature. I helped write budgets and always made sure that they were balanced, funded our priorities. And if you look at the last budget a year ago, it had a $15 billion increase. For the first time, over $100 billion went to state government. And the surplus amounted to about $2.5 billion. So in other words, less than 30% of the increase from last year. State government has plenty of money. State government has a spending problem. It does not have a revenue problem. There's plenty of money in Madison with our state government to be able to backfill that, to make sure that we allow the taxpayers to have some of their money back. There's a surplus. We should give it back to those who provided it to the state.
I've often heard you say, don't Minnesota my Wisconsin, and that Minnesota and Illinois are woke and broke. But according to CNBC, they have a higher quality of life score than states that you've referred to in the past, like Texas and Tennessee, and that their healthcare costs are generally lower. Do you support, I guess, how do you plan on making healthcare more accessible and affordable despite not supporting a more socialized option like your opponents on the other side of the aisle?
So I would challenge CNBC. I would like to see their methodology that they use, because clearly the quality of life in Minnesota and Illinois is in real decline. I mean, I grew up in the shadow of the Twin Cities. I have many friends and relatives that are over there, and Minnesota is very much in decline. We do not want to follow them. But in regards to health care, so I voted to put more money into health care in Congress. We voted to put more money into the Medicaid program here in Wisconsin. But also, I would adopt choice, competition, and transparency. We have to have greater transparency if people are going to have affordable health care, because you are correct. We are a high-cost state here in Wisconsin, and we need to bring those prices down. It starts by having greater affordability. Other things that I would do is there is significant fraud with the Medicaid program. When we're seeing some of that exposed now, we need to make sure that that money is not going to people who are defrauding the system. Also, there's people who are on the system here in Wisconsin that are able-bodied and can work. We should make sure that those who are able-bodied and can work, that they're at least getting job training, so hopefully we can get them off from the system, and that's going to free up money for those who are truly in need.
Now, you said that you voted to put more money into the Medicaid system, but according to the Congressional Budget Office, it estimates that the Big Beautiful Bill will cut federal spending by $1.2 trillion, mainly because many of the people who were on Medicaid won't be on it in 2034. They estimate 10.5 million, according to that office. Now, what do you say to folks who might lose their access to health care, especially if they are on Medicare or on Medicaid?
Many of those people that are losing their health care are here illegally. I do not believe we should.
Do you have any proof of that, though?
We should not have to fund people who are here illegally. We should not have to fund those who are able-bodied and could choose to work. So that's the process that's being worked through now, is making sure that those who are on the system that are here illegally or have chosen not to work, that they not receive those benefits from hard-working taxpayers. And if you look at, there's already 3 million people that have left the United States either voluntarily or have been deported who are here illegally, many of them with violent criminal records. And also, you cite the Congressional Budget Office. Over the next 10 years, we're going to spend 30% more money on the Medicaid program. That's an increase. It's only in Washington, D.C. and Madison where you see increases of spending and they call it a cut.
But some argue that the work requirements are adding an administrative burden to the Medicaid and Medicare offices because you're now having to track that. People are having to re-enroll. They're having to prove that they're qualified. So how do you make sure that those administrative expenses don't go up with these now work requirements that are going to be coming down because of the Big Beautiful Bill?
Oh, we have plenty of people working at the state level that can administer this program. I mean, look, this has been done twice successfully in Wisconsin. Governor Thompson did it back in the 1990s with his program, and they were able to get able-bodied people to work, and it reduced our welfare rolls significantly. It was done again after the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009. This has been proven to work. We can do it again.
Would you support some sort of legislation to require employers to offer some form of health care, considering, you know, the work requirements are kind of tied to people's health care, and not everybody can afford to go buy it on the exchange? It's very expensive, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, most employers do offer that I talk to offer health insurance at this point. And so I think they have been stepping up to the plate and helping with that. But I think there's other ways that we can go about this also. I'm very familiar with something called direct primary care, where people can get their basic coverage for sometimes less than $1,000 a year to make sure that they're getting their basic care taken care of. We need to offer more options, more choices, more options for people, rather than restricting them, because that's what's happening at this point. We're ending up with fewer options.
Do you think kind of maybe breaking up some of the monopolies is a solution as well when it comes to healthcare coverage and health insurance?
Choice, competition, transparency. Competition is always healthy, and we should have more competition. I talk to doctors regularly who say, we would really like to start our own practice. It's very difficult to do that. Some of that is regulatory impediments that are out there, and that's certainly part of what we're going to do, not just for healthcare, but across the regulatory environment. We're going to reduce regulations in Wisconsin to cut red tape, give people more freedom. We
could talk about healthcare all day, but I do want to move on to data centers. I want to start with what your stance is on data centers, especially as some Democrats have supported a moratorium. Is that something you support, especially as some say that data centers are kind of the economic driver in our country right now? Yeah, no data centers should be built unless they meet a series of conditions, and one of them is that we should remove the tax incentive that was signed by Governor Evers a couple years ago. These are very wealthy companies. They do not need subsidies from the taxpayers of Wisconsin. So we should eliminate that subsidy, and we should make sure people's electricity rates do not go up. That should be a condition. We should make sure that there's local input, that local governments have a say in where they're sited. And then no non-disclosure agreements. We should make sure that there's full transparency
of the negotiations that are going on amongst local communities and the data centers. And then the final thing is consistent with my position in regards to wind and solar. We should not be subsidizing the conversion of our farmland in Wisconsin. We are losing thousands of acres of farmland at this point, and that's a bad trade-off for Wisconsin, where we're such a proud, strong agricultural state.
It seems like a lot of your guidelines align with people on the other side of the aisle. Do you think that data centers are somewhere that Democrats and Republicans can work together?
Yeah, hopefully that'll be the case, as long as with many other things. All I know is that I've set the standards that I believe need to be in place, and I will make sure and follow through on that.
Do you think those standards need to be in place for data centers that are currently in operation and those that are going to be built in the future?
I think it's hard for those that are already being constructed to do something retroactively. I think that's difficult to do that. But certainly for the future, we should make sure that we have conditions in place that they fit what we want to do in Wisconsin, that it fits our priorities in Wisconsin.
Moving on to education, you say that you will deliver real results, higher standards, and honest report cards. Education dollars will go to students, teachers, and local communities, not the system. What do you mean by the system?
Yeah, so, you know, as a parent who took great pride in getting a good education for our children, I mean, I went to a local public school with my brothers and sisters. Our 3 daughters did. They got a good education up in the Northwoods in the Minocqua School District. I mean, we took great pride in making sure that our kids got a good education and they had good teachers. And what I want to see happen is the Department of Public Instruction has lowered standards here in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a long, proud history of giving a very good education to our children, always in the top 5 with test scores. Well, that's slipped now. We need to set higher standards, not lower standards. We need honest report cards so parents know how those schools are doing. And we're going to put more money into schools, but we're going to make sure it follows students and their families. And we need to make sure more money gets in the classroom rather than the administrative bloat that has went on. We've seen so much of the additional funding that's been going into schools that has been going to administration. We got to make sure we pay good teachers more money. We need to make sure teachers are safe in the classroom. One of the number one reasons teachers are leaving the classroom at this point is because they do not feel safe in the classroom. We need to hold administrators accountable for both results for our students as well as the safety of our students and our teachers. And we put a lot of money in the educational system. I think it's over $18,000 per student in Wisconsin. Now that's the most we've ever spent. So I'm open to putting more money into schools, but we have to have accountability. We have to make sure that we're getting our kids a good education.
And schools often say that funding is the issue. Are you going to bring teachers and administrators to the table when you're crafting your education policy?
Yeah, so I've been touring a number of schools around Wisconsin, both large and small, and I want to make sure that we get their input because I know they're as frustrated when I talk to school board members and administrators, they're as frustrated as anyone that they're not getting the help from the state that they really need. And we're going to make sure that that happens. And I'm going to use the bully pulpit to make sure the Department of Public Instruction, they do their jobs because it's clear at this point, they're not.
So making sure that teacher outcomes or student outcomes due to teaching are a portion of your education policy.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the chief concern that I have at this point is the reading scores that we're seeing. I mean, almost 70% of 4th graders are not proficient readers in Wisconsin. We've never had that before. And it's because reading is not being taught appropriately. We need to make sure our colleges of instruction are teaching the next generation of teachers the right way, the science of reading. We need to make sure that that happens, and then we may need to do remediation with some of the teachers around the state to make sure that we're doing the science of reading correctly and that we have good, strong readers, because if you can't read by 3rd grade, it's going to be really difficult to catch up for the rest of your life.
And many communities have turned to referendums for school funding. How do you plan for schools to be funded properly while also lowering property taxes?
Yeah, we'll put more money into schools. If you look at a decade ago, when I was in the state legislature, we froze property taxes, but we found other ways including shared revenue, to put more money into schools. So Madison has plenty of money. State government has plenty of money. The budget last year went from $99 billion to $114 billion. The first time over $100 billion. State's got plenty of money. They can help the locals out when we freeze property taxes.
Now, according to Forbes, President Donald Trump's approval rating is hovering between 37 to 40%. He's obviously endorsed you. Many people are concerned with the economy, immigration, and foreign conflicts. What is your response to critics who say that you are a rubber stamp for the Trump administration?
Yeah, they don't know Tom Tiffany very well. I served as a local town supervisor for 2 terms. I served in the legislature, now I've served in Congress. I understand how it all works from local to the federal government. And the reason I'm running for governor is that this is a good state with wonderful people. And I love this state, and I want to see it do better. I believe I can have the greatest impact and do the most good as governor. I could have stayed in my congressional seat and probably been elected well into the future, but I got into politics to make Wisconsin a better state. And we did that when I was first elected. We had over a $3 billion deficit. We got rid of that deficit and ended up with a rainy day fund by the time I had left the legislature. There was nearly a 10% unemployment rate. We reduced that significantly in the years that I was in the legislature. I'm going to Madison to get results done. Our state is moving towards Minnesota's madness and Illinois' insanity, and I think we can do better, and I will provide the leadership. I'll provide the leadership to make that happen, to unlock our great potential in Wisconsin.
So if Donald Trump comes and says, hey, I want you to pass this policy, you're not just going to immediately do it?
Oh, no. I'll be the governor of the state of Wisconsin. But I'll also have a strong relationship with, I think about people like the head of the EPA, Lee Zeldin. I served with him. We've got real issues here in southeastern Wisconsin with this non-attainment zone. I have good connections that I'm going to be able to talk to these people, that they'll be able to help us in Wisconsin. So it doesn't matter to me. If I'm elected as governor, I'll overlap with President Trump for 2 years. Then there's going to be a new president. And whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, I'm going to work with them to do what's best for Wisconsin, because that's what I've always done. I will do what's best for Wisconsin.
And you've said that the state doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. What areas do you think that the state can cut funding?
So I've always divided the budget into wants and needs. Sitting on the finance committee for writing 3 budgets, I got a front row seat to helping Wisconsin get to a better place in terms of our finances. Largest rainy day fund we had when I left the legislature. We had put the most money in education in the last budget that I voted for in 2019. And so I think it's a matter of dividing between wants and needs. And the needs are things like education, healthcare, transportation and infrastructure. We need to make sure we have a good transportation, we have good roads, secure bridges. We need to make sure that we have that. And so I will make sure that first call goes to those things that are our needs, and then we have competition for what are those wants out there.
And the governor has asked for grant funding to connect Milwaukee to Madison for an Amtrak rail. Do you support that? Is that something that you would make a priority, or?
Yeah, I will not make that a priority.
Okay. Why not?
We've seen mass transit systems like the one in California that has been being built for the last 10 years. Severe cost overruns. It's still not completed. No one's ridden on that train. The mass transit systems just have not worked. And until somebody shows me a model that will work, I don't think that's the best use of taxpayer dollars.
Okay. Well, you've made claims that there is fraud happening in Wisconsin and that you will audit every government agency, but the Legislative Audit Bureau already does that work, and it's overseen by the Republican-controlled legislature. So is that work already being done in the state, or do you feel that it's not being done properly?
So they're doing some of it. I think there just needs to be a much more robust effort. I mean, look at a couple examples. There is $1.6 million of food stamps that were laundered through a gas station right here in Milwaukee over the course of 3 years. That's theft, stealing from the taxpayers. We're seeing millions of dollars as a result of the federal efforts right now in Wisconsin where Medicaid dollars are being stolen, including right here in Milwaukee. We need to make sure we root out that fraud. Now, State government is not helping with this at this point. Governor Evers has said there's very little fraud that's going on. It's not a concern. I mean, how do you know that unless you really do a deep dive? I want to do a deep dive, work in coordination with those federal agencies that deal with Medicaid and other federal programs like that, and let's make sure that we root out all the fraud. The appropriate amount of fraud here in Wisconsin is 0.
But if people are being caught for the fraud, isn't the system working?
Yeah, on a limited, I believe on a limited basis. I think we're going to find tens of millions of dollars of, not just fraud, but also like improper payments. And we need to make sure we clean up the system and make sure it's functioning well.
In Wisconsin, independent voters are who you need to convince to, win the general. But in Congress, you are a part of the Freedom Caucus, which some would consider to be the extreme right of your party. How do you convince people that are independent or that are maybe moderates that you're the right choice?
I would urge them to take a look at the things that I advocated for. The Freedom Caucus stood for, let's have secure borders. And we now have secure borders. Crime has been reduced 20% here in the United States. Those are good things, having the border secure. The fentanyl has been reduced significantly, one of the #1 killers of young people. The violent crime rate has went down 20%, unprecedented the amount of decrease in the last year and a half. I mean, I stood for those things, and I think that's the right thing to stand for. I believe in having lower energy prices, and I will fight for those every day. $2 billion and counting of increases in the last 8 years in people's utility bills in Wisconsin. We saw last winter, some people's monthly bill went up $200 to $300 year over year. And we need to have affordable energy. So secure borders, lowering crime, having lower energy prices. I think most people agree with that, not just independents, but Democrats also.
Well, and you've been an advocate for the SAVE Act, which is controversial. Some people in your own party don't even support it. And you've also, been supporting investigations into alleged voter fraud here in the state of Wisconsin. So I want to ask you point blank, do you believe that Donald Trump lost the election in 2020? And do you believe that Wisconsin elections are secure?
I think we can always do better. I mean, look at the Green Bay clerk was just recently put on leave. Most clerks across the state do a terrific job. I mean, they do a good job. But you got to make sure that everyone is doing their job. Look at the Madison City clerk in 2024. She was fired because she did not count 197 ballots after we raised concerns about her putting out 2,000 duplicate absentee ballots. So we want to make sure that we have a good, honest system here in Wisconsin. In regards to the SAVE Act, it requires photo ID. We have that in Wisconsin. We've had it for over a decade, and our turnout has actually went up while having photo ID. And the other main provision is to make sure that you're a citizen of the United States. And I think this is a bipartisan issue. The polling I see on it is a 75 or 80% issue. People, regardless of their political affiliation, believe people should be a citizen, and you should be who you are and prove who you are when you vote. Make it easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Do you believe there was fraud in the 2020 election?
So there were what I call improprieties. I mean, for example, the Dane County clerk declared that people could just claim themselves to be indefinitely confined. What that allows that person to do is not produce a photo ID in order to vote. That clerk did not have the legal authority to do it. Only the legislature can change the law. So there were some improprieties that went on. We just need to clean them up. And if you look at the ensuing years, people have voted for election integrity in Wisconsin. For example, Zuckerberg, the billionaire, put millions of dollars here into Wisconsin trying to privatize our elections. And people voted to stop that with a referendum a couple years ago. People want to have election integrity, and that's all I'm shooting to do also. Let's make sure we have good, fair, honest elections.
What do you say to people who oppose the SAVE Act, though, and say that it's the federal government trying to control local elections?
So I think it's a legitimate point to say we got to make sure that that elections are a state function, correct? But I think the two things that you're requiring there, citizenship and photo ID, proving who you are, I think that's an appropriate role for the federal government. Now, the federal government coming in and taking over state elections, that would be overreach.
I'm just going to ask you again, Did Donald Trump lose the election in 2020? Do you believe that he lost the
So
election?
Joe Biden won the presidency in 2020.
Overall, why should people vote for you as governor?
Oh, we're going to bring a vision of leadership. So I'm a lifelong resident of Wisconsin, grew up here. My wife and I lived the American dream, owned our own business for 20 years, and raised our family here. I have deep roots here in Wisconsin. This is a great state, but we're not reaching our potential, and I want to unlock that potential here in Wisconsin. We can be one of the great states in America once again, and I think 2026 is going to be a watershed election. We're going to have a socialist who's going to be running on the other side. I believe in free markets, free people, giving people more opportunity. I think the contrast is going to be very clear, and I think people want Wisconsin to be one of the best states in America, and we're going to deliver on that with real leadership.
Congressman Tom Tiffany and gubernatorial candidate, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to join you, Meredith.